Hey, hi, how are you? I'm your host, Grim, or Jay. Very nice to meet you. I hope things are going nice to decent with you, and happy Valentine's Day. Well, before we do start with this story, I want to really wish you a very happy and jolly day, and hey, don't worry too much if you're single or even with someone. Cherish what you have and do the best that you can with it. Things will work out. But without further ado, let's get into this story. We're going to have a little bit of music in the background if that is okay with you. Something soothing. My little miracle. Don't forget to sit back and lay down, relax, whatever you can. Let me know if y'all want me to take a more chill or rough approach or whatever type of approach with these stories. Little Miracle. It's the nickname my parents have called me for as long as I can remember. My mom and dad always wanted to have a child. When I grew older, they told me about the many years of miscarriages and health issues they went through trying to bring a child into the world. When they found out about my conception, they were ecstatic. They thanked God for his blessing and worked closely with doctors to ensure this was the one they got right. But it was far from easy. During the entire pregnancy, my mom had issue after issue. Preeclampsia, hyperemia gravidarum, preterm labor, and so much more that just made her suffer. Scans showed visible structural abnormalities in me as an embryo. Even if I was born, I was likely to not have a high quality of life. Later tests showed signs of sickle cell anemia as well. My parents didn't care. They believed that with enough prayer, God would heal me in my mother's womb and take away my limp arm and leg. That didn't work. At around the 26-week mark, the preeclampsia got so bad the doctors had to induce labor. It was bloody, painful, and horrifying for both of my parents. But by the end of it, I was born. Quickly, the nurses and doctors hooked me up to machines and kept me growing in an ICU. During the time, my mom stabilized and recovered as well. After a month, I was allowed to be brought back home. Pain medication was my daily routine. Without it, my body would be in agony that would seize my body for hours or worse. The seizures would come, and on top of that, my left arm and leg were just stubs wearing the facade of being useful. After giving a prosthetic leg, I was able to walk. But an arm was way too expensive for my parents to afford. Even with a new leg, I wasn't able to keep up with the other children. Watching them run and play together filled me with deep envy. I tried to play alongside them to try to fit in. But who would want to be friends with the limp? That was also my nickname. It was awful. My peers would laugh in glee as they tore me apart. There was even a time when a group of them stole and hid my damn prosthetic leg. My teacher had to convince them to give it back. But even then, they had written all kinds of words and phrases on the metal. But to my parents, I was still a little miracle. the joy of my parents' lives. They told me not to listen to the other kids, that I was a blessing that I couldn't understand. My pain would bring me wisdom and strength that others would wish for. Do you know what I thought about wishing for? I wished that I had functioning limbs. I wished that I didn't need to be drugged to be okay. I wished that I wasn't born as this misbegotten miracle. They never once told me I had a negative impact on their lives, but I heard what they thought behind closed doors. Some nights I would hear my mother sobbing behind her closed door and my father's gentle voice consoling her. I always wondered why she was the one crying. She wasn't the one in pain. It got to a point where I forced their door open and I confronted them. I called them selfish. How could they be the ones feeling guilty when they had every chance not to go through with my creation? How could they have the gall to proclaim that I was somehow a miracle? My words made my mom cry harder and harder, and my dad's face was filled with anger. Anger. Because for the first time in my life, he put his hands on me and he slapped me across the face hard, leaving my cheek throbbing, and I was stunned. Afterwards, he stood there in disbelief at his own action and tried to quickly apologize. I hobbled out of the room, not giving either of them a chance to speak. I didn't ever want to hear an apology from them unless it was about bringing me into this world, yet that never came. They acted as if that night never happened. And before going to school, my mother kissed me on my head and called me her little miracle, as if she tried convincing herself. At that point, something unexplainable happened to me. I felt as if the partial humanity I was born with had suddenly been drained from my body. I wasn't close to anything of a bloody miracle. And if they didn't want to understand my suffering, I wanted them to experience it themselves. A few nights later, I had the intention of slipping enough of my lorazepam into their drinks to keep them passed out throughout the night, and I took this time to bind them to the bed using the rope we had in the garage. And I grabbed a large steak knife from the kitchen. When I stood over them, I stopped for a second and I looked over their graying hair and resting faces. I almost turned around and went to bed, but in my head I heard the same phrase playing in a loop. My little miracle. I want y'all to know, as the narrator of this story, this is when things become unfathomably dark. So please, prepare yourself. I thrust the knife into their sleeping bodies with a hollow apathy. I felt little resistance as I went in, and I was only spurred on when my father's eyes slowly opened in his response to my mom's gurgles. He tried to raise his hand but was caught by the rope. When our eyes met, all he could mutter was a half-hearted, "I'm so sorry." By the time I had finished, my hands and face were stained red, and the only part that bothered me was how I felt grossly sticky. I took an extremely long, hot shower, washing away the grime of the scene I had left in the master bedroom. When I finished, I dried myself off and went downstairs so calmly, so slow. And I called the police on myself, and I stood at the front door holding the knife in my hand. And I waited for them to arrive. When they drew their guns on me and told me to drop the knife instead, I sprinted as fast as I could to them. From their perspective, they must have seen a girl lazily limping towards them. I wanted them to shoot me, and for the first time in my life, I prayed to God. I prayed that He would give me a quick release. Instead, I ended up shaking uncontrollably on the ground when their taser barbs stuck into my chest, and eventually the shaking evolved into a full body spasm, and an uncontrollable seizure overtook me. While my vision blurred and darkened, I wondered to myself, am I still a little miracle? That was a very morbid story. Let me give y'all something personal. I myself have had a event in my life where I have lost a child with one of the best people in the world that I've ever known, right? Sure, I had a lot of things that I had that would have probably messed that child over, such as asthma, heart problems, or anything like that, and my partner also had some other stuff happening with her as well. And I'm not going to lie, it would have been extremely selfish for us to bring that child into the world given our circumstances. We still would have loved them, we still would have appreciated them and everything furthermore, but looking at what this person says on this comment, this person says this: I think about this a lot, how selfish it is for people to want a child to feel complete. And they're so right about that, because as people, this is why I say, if I do have a child, I am excited to watch them grow and turn into their own individual. People are individuals. We are people. And there's a problem within life that could be detrimental. It's not always the best option, especially if it's not ourselves. And people think that babies or your children will love you always. That's not the case. It's 100% our responsibility and our sacrifice 24/7 that we can do our very best and still fail, because essentially you're trying to mold a clay or whatever to satisfy yourself. All this child asked them to do is, I don't think you'll understand my pain. That understanding, that misalignment cost those parents their lives. Now sure, no, more than sure, that individual, that person that committed the heinous acts of deleting their parents is just unfathomable. Super duper unfathomable, because, well, I don't know, that horrifies me. That what love my child and do everything that I can, they, especially with what they would want and even need as well, and they still go through with the act of murder. I wouldn't wish anything bad upon my child, but it's just I would want to understand where I went wrong, what I could have done better, and just that hits way too close to home. And if anyone has seen or experienced something like that, I am very sorry. Children are just, they are amazing and wonderful things. But my goodness, we have to do a lot better by them, given what we had to go through. I'll read one more story because that hit a little bit too close to home. This next story is called Tearjerker. I showed up to the house half an hour early, but they were already there. It was an Airbnb they rent me for the night. Well, that they had rent for me. They told me which one to pick because they were familiar and it met their specific criteria. When I asked what the criteria was, they said, well, they told me without hesitation. No houses within sight line of this house or its driveway. No external or internal cameras. And no rivers of creeks anywhere on the property. I wanted to ask some follow-up questions, especially about the water, but they had already moved on in our online chat session. They were polite the entire time, but in a professional, almost distracted way that made it seem like they had to squeeze me in appointments that were much more important. Part of me wanted to balk at that. I was being asked to pay $5,000 after all. But I knew better. I was either paying for a scam or a miracle. In either way, I was desperate enough to try. Well, when I arrived, they said, welcome, welcome. Kim, I'm going to call you Kim if that's all right. I feel like I know you well already. The chubby blonde woman was walking and smiling and waving as she beckoned me deeper into the rental house. I heard an accent, probably Norwegian, I think, in her friendly voice. And every word was said with hard precision, like granite being warmed by soft hands. Moving into the living room, she sat down on the sofa and pointed for me to do the same. Once we were settled, I quickly found myself unnerved by having to sit very close to her. Her eyes were big, pale, and she rarely blinked. Her lips made a light smacking sound when she spoke. She was speaking again, just then asking a question I had missed. I'm sorry, wait, what? I asked if you were ready to begin. I blinked and I didn't know what I expected, but this was all happening so fast. Between what Paula had told me and the questions I asked over chat, I feel like I had a decent idea of what was going to happen. But in my growing panic, I decided to go back over the major points to buy some time for my spine to come back. So, this procedure, it won't hurt? The woman's eyes widened as she gave a little laugh. Hurt you? Goodness, no. She gave a thoughtful shrug as she continued. Well, the telling of everything can be very hard, but after this last time, it'll be done. That's the whole point, right? Frowning, and I nodded. And are you really saying that after all this, I won't be depressed anymore. I won't want to hurt myself or anything, like permanently. And she nodded. When it is finished, the pain that has weighed you down for so long will be gone for good. And I won't turn into an emotionless robot or anything like that, right? Please. The woman grinned at me. You kids and your silly movie ideas. No, nothing like that. You can still be sad and hurt, but only by new things, not the past. You keep the memories, but not the pain. And when you do feel pain, that new pain, it won't be so sharp and terrible. It'll be something you can live with. She reached out and patted my hand. Doesn't that feel good? And despite my anxiety, I found myself smiling at her. It does. It really fucking does, I said to her. Her smile widened. Good, she said, reaching into her box, and she pulled out a long wooden box. Inside was a glass eyedropper with a small black bulb on the end. She examined it for a good moment, and before looking back at me, she told me, then it's time for you to start. Tell me everything that hurts you, that makes you want to die. Don't stop when the tears come, and they will come. Keep going until I tell you it's done. I spent the next hour pulling out every bad thing from the shadowed corners of my heart. The death, the loneliness, the guilt, and fear. Everything that was wrong with me. Everything I've tried and failed at. Everything I lost or would never have. By the end of it, I was sweating, sobbing, and barely able to breathe. The words still kept flowing, but I could feel them beginning to slow, and it was at that moment that the woman grabbed my chin. Tilting my head back slightly, she edged the eyedropper up to my cheek to catch my tears. She moved with a practiced hand, and within a couple of minutes the dropper was full. She released me, plucking a small cap from the box and put it at the end of the eyedropper before stowing the dropper back inside. Closing the box, she did, while studying me with a serious eye for a few moments, several moments really, before asking her next question. How do you feel? I sucked in a breath at that question. How did I feel? Any different? And if so, was it just going to be some placebo? And no. Oh God, I just started crying again. It's gone. It's all gone. God, I don't even know how, but yeah. Yeah, I feel great. So much better, I said. I kept wiping my tears, and I even started laughing, and the woman sat patiently until I got myself under control. And when I could speak again, I looked up at her questioningly, because I felt something just weird. But I said to her, How? How is it possible that this works, really works? Is it a trick? She shook her head. No trick. I swallowed and nodded, and my heart began even lighter. Is it magic? I said to her. The woman chuckled at that, and depending on who you ask, she said, most of anything can seem like magic. The important part is, how do you feel? Do you like how you feel now? I nodded. Oh yes, I don't even remember ever feeling so light. It's not even being happy Even though I am happy, I just feel light and free. She raised an eyebrow, smiling. And not like a robot or a zombie? You still have your memory, she said, letting out a slow, nervous breath. I forced myself to remember, and first small things, then heavy and bigger things that had been eating at me for years. I felt my eyes widen as I stared at her. No was all there, and some of it still makes me a little sad or whatever, or even angry, but not a lot. It seems more remote, safer. And I laughed. And I said, it's like it happened to me in the past. Laugh. She echoed my laughter. That's not far from the truth. You're on a new path now, or you can be. Do you want to keep yourself this way? I frowned at her. Of course, and I'll pay you the money, more if you need me to. I just need to stay like this, I said to her. Shaking her head, she picked up the box. No, nothing like that. A deal's a deal, and money isn't very important. She handed it to me, but the last step is... She said something to me that felt weird. You have to feed your sorrow to another within the next 5 days. I felt myself jerk as though I had been struck. Wait. What do you mean? What do you mean? She shrugged. Just what I said. This pain has to go somewhere or it will find its way back to you. Your tears need to be ingested by another and given time to take root there. It is your job to find that person and give them your tears. I stared at her. Because this sounded like some absolute horse shit. And I said to her, what? No, I mean, what does that do to them? Make them feel the way that I did? That's impossible. And the woman's eyes and her smile faded as she leaned back slightly. Her eyes began to grow cool as she regarded me. Do you know how you tried to tell people how sad and depressed you were? How you wanted to kill yourself? Had almost tried twice before. I shook my head. I didn't tell anyone, I said to her. A thin smile returned to her lips as she held up her arm to show me her deeply scarred wrists. She said, neither did I. My parents, best friend, and my boyfriend. I'd have told them almost anything else, but not that. I shrugged and said, because you don't want them to worry? Her laugh was harsher this time. No, that's a lie, she said. It's because we do try to tell people. Maybe not with a big conversation or confession, but we test the waters and what we say and how we act around them. And we see their surface level concern, their love for us so long as it's convenient. But beneath that, there's resentment that we are disrupting what they want to do or think about. And more than that, there's almost a fear. Even when they ask if everything's okay, I could tell they just wanted me to say yes. As though deep down they're afraid it's catching. The woman's smile broadened. Because it is not highly contagious, but able to be passed along, as you must do now. but I don't want to hurt anyone. The woman waved away my sentiment. She said, it's not a question of being hurt. Someone, whether they meant to or not, gave this to you at some point. This extra burden. It can't be created or destroyed, but it can be moved. Folding her hands on one knee, she gave a short stiff and a sniff. That can be because you off yourself, of course. It will move on, then to someone else, someone you don't choose. Or you can actually be in control of your life for once and decide who to burden with this thing. If you choose well, you'll find someone that can carry the burden better than you ever could. Standing up, I've started pacing back and forth, cradling the box in my arms like an infant, so I can pick anyone. Another chuckle came from her. Let me save you some time. It has to be a human. They have to be alive. They can't be on death's door. This thing I took from you is far from stupid. And it won't waste time building a new nest in a soon-to-be corpse. I'd rather spend that energy crawling back to you. I gave a shudder. Who then? A bad person? She shrugged. That's one way to go. You don't know what the sudden influx of negative emotions will do to someone that already has destructive tendencies. They might even take it out on other people. I grew stressed and upset, but it had been an entirely different quality than I'd ever felt before. I could see the problem clearly, and I cared about finding a solution I was comfortable with. But I wasn't spiraling down the throat of some anxious depression, hating myself for not having an answer, or for really trying this in the first place. After pacing a few more seconds, I looked back to her. So who do you suggest? I said. Her face intently meant serious to the upteenth degree. Honestly, she said, I'd consider a child. A baby would be even better. They are far more resilient and their memories are more pliable. Chances are it would just get absorbed into their personality and never affect them that much. Or if not, they will be better equipped, or maybe, to handle it better than you can. It doesn't affect everyone the same. I felt my skin beginning to prickle. I said to her, did you know I worked in a neonatal unit at my hospital? Her eyebrows drew together as she shook her head slowly. No, you never told me where you worked, but there you are. A simple solution. Letting out a small gasp, I put the box on the coffee table in front of the woman. I said to her, no, you do it. I'm paying you a lot of money, and I need you to do it. Standing up, she smoothed her blouse as she spoke to me. It isn't for me to do. It's your job to finish, or to not. Scowling, I picked up the box, and I thrust it at her. I said to her, I won't pay if you don't do this part too. She cackled and started walking toward the front hallway. She said, I don't care about the money. That's just to weed it out, how you say. Tourists and make people feel they're getting value, or something of value. Keep the money. I had followed her out to the front door, and as she opened it, she turned around. But her demeanor, her everything grew darker and colder before. She then said something that's absolutely just was just unfathomable. Keep the tears too if you wish. Drink them yourself or wait for the thing to come back on its own until it has fully nested somewhere. It can find you wherever you go, she said. She turned to leave but then hesitated, and when she turned back, her expression was a bit more kind, and she said, "But think about how you feel now. Don't you deserve the chance to really live? Or is the happiness of strangers worth more than your own?" She reached out and gave my wrist a squeeze. She then said, "Take it from me, it's not." And with that, she was gone. Pain and sadness changes who you are. Guilt and fear will twist you to the point that you hate yourself because you don't recognize what you've become. Didn't you used to be better than this? More than this? Or is this broken, bitter thing what you always were meant to be? Being free of that, I felt like myself again, actually happy. I thought it might make some softer or kinder well-being of me, something more forgiving. And maybe in some ways it has. I definitely feel for people that are going through hard times, and I try to help them when I can. That's part of the reason why I became a doctor after all. But having this thing taken from me has also given me a lot of clarity about who I am and what I'm willing to do to protect myself. Some time has passed, and someone said to me, "Hey Doc, aren't you supposed to be heading home already?" I looked up as I closed the door. One of the younger nurses, Ryan something, he was a nice guy, but a bit too talkative. "Yeah, I'm about to." I hooked the thumb back at the room I just came from. Just wanted to look in on some of the babies before I went, see how life is treating them. Ryan grinned at me. "They're babies. Everybody thinks they're cute and they get held and fed round the clock. I'd say life is treating them pretty good so far." I was silent for a moment before forcing a smile. "Yeah, maybe so. Still pay extra attention to the one in the back. The Reynolds kid, maybe it's just a fluke, but he's in there crying up a storm." The nurse raised his eyebrows. "Really? He's usually super chill. I'll go check on him now." Moving past me to the door, he gave me a parting glance. Have a good weekend," he said. And I grinned at him. Oh yeah, I will. Wow, that was... wow. To the unspeakable depths, all the things that we go through is just... this molds, this shapes who you will become. Either you can let go of it, embrace it, or anything like that and become who or whatever you want to be. Or you can let it take over you and mold you into something that's just that negative thing. I know what it's like to be on both sides, especially the extremes of unbelievable kindness and unfathomable darkness that is so destructive that it corrupts everything it touches. At the end of the day, it's the end of the day. The next day, you can harbor anything that has happened to you, or you can just start a new day, new you, new anything. You don't have to wait till the end of the year to just say, hey, new year, new me. You can still become whatever you want to be. It's just, you have to see it through. And yes, fighting that selfish nature versus that selfless nature is just, it's hard. Especially in terms of trying to do stuff for yourself. Because after all, who's going to look after you besides you? I love my partner more than anything, but I also recognize too that I still have to help and do some things for myself. Because I don't ever want to be a burden or a mess to her. And I don't ever want her to feel like she's a burden or a mess to me. But despite that, the things that have happened to us stop and halt us from really being who or what we are, or maybe that's always what we have been. Those two stories hit harder than anything else. And they really hit hard and closer to home with me than anything else too. I know today is Valentine's Day, but as much as you're going to treat that loved one very special, and oh so just anything else that's positive, hopefully, don't forget to just be the same way with yourself. Even if you really don't like yourself, these things work out. You made time for this person, make sure to make time for you as well. This is your host, Grimmer J, and I will see you around for the next set of horror tales. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and have a really, really nice day.